This is now happening just hours.
Hello? Okay, let me tell you about this island in the middle of the English Channel that until 2008 was feudal. I found this. Okay, let me give you some backstory on this. So, last summer, I was given this, which is a bunch of bound copies of the National Geographic magazine from 1932, and I found this article which is titled The Feudal Isle of Sark, Where 16th Century Laws Are Still Observed by Sybil Hathaway. When I first saw this article, I thought this must be some sort of legal technicality, like some sort of BuzzFeed article where it's like top 10 interesting things. Number 1, you know, there's still a feudal island technically. But no, this really was a feudal island where all the families contributed tithes, like 10% of their crops or earnings or whatever, to the seigneur. So Sybil Hathaway, the author of the article, was the Dame of Sark. She was basically the feudal lord of the island. In the article, she details all the weird rules that the island had and all of the things that she was in control of. They had a parliament that met 3 times a year that she was in charge of, and that was called the Chief Pleas, which I think is an amazing name. So some of the weird rules. Only she was allowed to own carrier pigeons and female dogs, and she outlawed cars on the island, which I think is a great decision. And here's another quote. I inspect both schools at examination time and ask the children questions in French and English and satisfy myself as to their general mental progress. Another interesting thing about the island is that officially the island was originally part of Normandy, and so when William the Conqueror invaded England in 1065, the island of Sark probably contributed to that invasion. And so in the article, Sybil Hathaway explains that they still consider the then King of England, now Queen of England, the Duke or Duchess of Normandy, and not the King or Queen of England. There's just so many weird details about this island that I've come across, and there's too many to name. So after I read this article, though, I started thinking, because they mentioned briefly in the article the Great World War, the only one at the time, what could have happened on this island during World War II. And this is where the story gets even more interesting, because when the Nazis invaded France, most of the other English Channel islands evacuated to England, but Sybil Hathaway decided that she was going to stay, and she implored the other people on the island to do the same, because she was afraid that the Nazis would destroy the island if they found it abandoned, which they did. They destroyed some of the other islands. This is where one of Sybil Hathaway's main, I would call it a character flaw, I guess, is revealed, because during the war, it seems like, just based on the reading that I've done, that her chief concern was not for the people on the island, but for the island itself. So she could have evacuated it and sacrificed the island to save all the people that she cared about. She didn't. She made them stay on the island. Then when the Nazis invaded Sark and took over the island, she treated them very respectfully, some might say too respectfully considering they're, you know, Nazis, and she bent over backwards to make sure that no harm ever came to the island. Even after the war, she maintained correspondence with some of the German officers that had stayed on her island, which is questionable in and of itself. But then when they won the war, the English won the war, she talks about how, you know, they were starving and they were super afraid all the time. I'd like to believe that she did all this stuff with the German officers just to save the island, and she really was very afraid the whole time. But maybe she was more sympathetic to their cause than she made out later on in her life. Regardless, I think she's a super interesting character, and she continued to rule the island of Sark until 1974 when she died at the age of 90. But I just think it's such an interesting story. I guess I'll just end by reading the end of Sybil's article. I would like to conclude this account of my island and its interests by assuring my readers that my husband and I are determined to do all we can to maintain its ancient traditions and laws and customs which have made Sark what it is in this hustling 20th century, a little feudal paradise of peace and quiet where the wicked cease from troubling and the weary are at rest.